Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from the Voice of America in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Joke Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
For Nigeria to maximize the opportunities in its blue economy as well as compete favorably globally, efforts in this direction must be deliberate and sustained. This formed part of the takeaways at the Maritime Roundtable workshop, which focused on emerging technology and regulations in the global maritime sector and how they affect operations in Nigeria. Our correspondent, Timothy Crown Aderibigbe, reports.
There's no doubt that technology is changing how everything is done and, of course, dictating the future of things. It is in planning for that future and ensuring that Nigeria is not left behind that experts in the maritime industry are coming together to brainstorm on developing the Nigerian maritime sector.
We can co-create and shape a better future for the Nigerian maritime industry. Let us imbibe a forward-looking and thinking culture that will enable us to embrace the emerging regulations and technological advancement in a most worthy manner that propels the Nigerian maritime industry towards sustainable growth and prosperity.
Your Excellencies,
the Chief Convener and Professor of Political Economy, Pat Utomi, considers this convergence as coming at the nick of time.
I have argued that these unemployment problems we have, all of these, just the maritime can provide us twice as many jobs as we need in this country. So why can policymakers see something so obvious? We need to ask ourselves what the problem is.
The thematic core of this convergence is on regulation and legislation and how both can help place the sector on the same pedestal with its counterparts globally.
What we have even done is to actually design a sort of framework to assist people along the way. One of the things we designed was what we called the Maritime Regulations Awareness course, which we actually designed. And the funny thing is that when we designed this course like 4 or 5 years ago, the regulations have changed rapidly over the past 4 or 5 years.
Beyond the talk, there are calls for immediate action on what is said so far.
When I think about the number of committees that have been set up in the last 15 years or 24 years, from the presidential committees to the ministerial committees to the agency level committees, and we have committees coming out of our nose and our ears with really, really good quality content in terms of their reports, but no implementation. So I think one of the things that I hope we take away from here is how do we get to the point where we implement?
We cannot continue saying we are not progressing because this man didn't do this man didn't. We have pointed at each other for too long, and we thank you for this initiative for us to begin to talk again. But this shared understanding you're initiating, it has to continue.
This is the maiden edition of the conversation with promises, but it has come to stay. The desired results are seen. Timothy Crown, Aderibigbe, Channels Television News.
Now let's speak to the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Stars Investments Company Limited, Irogama Ogbefu. She joins us from Lagos via Zoom. Many thanks for joining us today on Africa 54.
Thank you. Good morning.
Right. So at one of the roundtable conversations by experts in the maritime industry in Nigeria, sufficient attention was given to the significance of IT deployment as well as regulation. How are these expected to impact the sector?
Thank you very much for having me on the show. And I think that the conversation around digitalization and the use of technology to drive efficiency and productivity in our sector is a very timely one, given where the world is today. Obviously, we would see the emergence of smart cities, smart ports. We would see the use of automation on board our vessels. We will see the use of blockchain to just drive, productivity in the way that we do things. I think that with the direction that the government is going prioritizing the digital economy and now specifically the marine and blue economy, I believe that there will be integration between both, and we will see private sector being able to contribute to how we use technology in today's age to achieve our set goals and objectives in the sector. So it will boost revenue, I can say that, job creation as well.
And players in the industry are quite resolute to drive a sector, as I mentioned before, that will compete favorably globally. What should they be looking at this point?
Should be looking at the political will to do what is required, right? So it's going to be painful as what comes with change. So we would need policies that are favorable. We would need policies that are friendly, that create an enabling business environment, that allow the private sectors, the private stakeholders who are resolute, like you said, to invest and grow their interest in the sector. We would also need to see more collaboration between private sector, public sector in terms of genuine and authentic stakeholder engagement where resolutions that are reached are actually implemented. We would like to see a sector where there is the opportunity for private sector to thrive. So not necessarily the government doing business, but private sector doing business in partnership with the government.
And what's the relationship like, if you may, between the private players in the maritime industry, and how should this be upscaled if it hasn't been already?
So there are a few associations, bodies that have come together, have been formed over the years, which serve as advocacy platforms to engage the government. Shipowners Association is one which I am a member of. There's also the Chamber of Shipping, which is also an advocacy body for the industry, and there are lots of other relevant associations. And that's why I pointed out earlier that there has to be that sincerity of purpose between government and private sector saying we're engaging, we're speaking, and we're going to implement. Right now, we have a good relationship with our regulators, but just like I said earlier, there has to be political will to do what is required to achieve what we all desire, which is to see a thriving blue economy emerge and to see Nigeria becoming the maritime hub central of Africa.
And what, in your view, are ways Nigeria can maximize profit from its blue economy?
I mean, we're a blessed nation, right? We're actually an ocean nation. We have expansive coastline, and we have lots of inland waterways. So there are opportunities in tourism and recreation. There are opportunities in transport. There are opportunities in in regional and international shipping, which provides that platform for us to maximize that opportunity. There's also opportunity for us to go into renewable energy through power generation by creating wind farms. Even reusing hyacinths that are found in most of our inland waterways. There's opportunity to export human resource in form of competent, upskilled workers, seafarers, port workers that can go into other countries, and sort of contribute to developing their maritime sector as we would have done here. So the opportunities abound, and I believe that there are a lot of roadmaps that have been created and developed over the years, a lot of ideas that have been put together. We just need to get to the point where we can, stop talking, start doing, coming together with that common objective and bringing in the experts. So I think we need to be done with bringing in people who don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the expertise or the knowledge. We need to bring those who actually know what they're doing and give them the room to act and to implement so that we can all benefit.
Right. So you spoke about the political will just, a few minutes ago. Now that the, sector in Nigeria has been officially changed to the blue economy with a minister in charge of that, do you think this name change will be like a positive step towards, turning around the sector? Definitely. I think the industry received that news with a lot of excitement and a lot of positivity and optimism that finally the maritime sector is getting the attention, the direct attention that it deserves, because it can contribute significantly to the overall economic
value of the country. So having a minister that is dedicated strictly to our sector is something that we always actually pushed for, and finally the federal government has heeded that request. And we're looking forward to working with the minister, his team, to help him achieve what I believe will be visionary leadership and the goals that we as private sector in the industry have set for ourselves, for our businesses, as well as for the country. So definitely it's a positive step in the right direction.
Right. Thanks again for your time, Mrs. Irogama Ogbefu, MD CEO, Stars Investments Company Limited. Thank you for coming on to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. After the break, Nigeria struggle for wheat self-sufficiency after Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal. Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal is affecting Nigeria's effort to become self-reliant in its wheat production. The deal allowed grain shipments from Ukraine's Black Sea ports. Now the commodity will be even more scarce in Nigeria, where production has already dropped due to climate change and insecurity. Timothy Obiezu has more on the story from Abuja.
Nigerian farmer Shitu Mohammed grows maize, sorghum, rice and wheat on more than 17,000 hectares. He's decided to start a flour mill to process the grain he produces. But these days, wheat, an essential ingredient for the factory, is very difficult to come by.
Wheat is a diamond, not even gold, because you can see what wheat, political turmoil that wheat is causing in the world. It's becoming difficult because the demand is higher than the supply.
The Nigerian government says the country is the second largest consumer of wheat in sub-Saharan Africa after Ethiopia, but less than a tenth of that wheat is grown locally. In 2015, authorities launched a program to help farmers grow more rice and wheat. But experts say insecurity, climate change, and policy inconsistencies have hindered progress.
There was inconsistency in the government policies, particularly in agriculture. Our policy has never been consistent.
With two of the biggest producers of wheat in the world, Russia and Ukraine at war, prices of wheat in Nigeria are skyrocketing. In July, Russia backed out of a deal reached a year ago to allow Ukrainian grain shipments through the Black Sea, blaming its withdrawal on Western trade sanctions. Soon after, Russia held a summit with African leaders and pledged free grain to Africa to soften the impact of its withdrawal from the deal.
We feel that Russia might do politics with those grains, and it is possible that we get a piece of that action. And we will be better off for it, because as far as we are concerned, we need it. We eat a lot of wheat in this country.
In July, President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency on food security and ordered the release of fertilizers, seeds, and grains to ease market pressures. He also announced $132 million support for the production of 250,000 hectares of rice, maize, wheat, and cassava during the next cropping season. But Olabanji says Nigeria really needs to boost the use of mechanized agriculture.
Farming can no longer be manual. It can never work for food security.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture predicts wheat production in Nigeria will rise 42% by next year. If that's true, it's good news for people like Shitu Mohammed. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
The power of art to uplift not just children, but any individual in the most trying times is one to reckon with. This is why displaced artists took it upon themselves to bring hope to children in refugee camps who fled war-torn Sudan amid the prolonged conflict between the Sudanese army and rapid support forces.
Displaced artists, driven by a desire to offer solace and respite, stepped up to entertain children at camps in the Madani capital of Al Jazeera State in East Central Sudan, 4 months after the armed conflict broke out in Sudan. Artists can be seen engaging the young mind in support and fun activities, aiming to provide a temporary escape from the hardships of their circumstances. Mawaheb Al-Mahi, a specialist in puppet theatre and teaching and entertainment aids, highlighted the profound impact their artistic endeavors have had on the children.
Since we, performers, musicians and plastic artists came here, all the children have become our brothers and sisters. They even cry when their parents ask them to leave the center. They consider this place as their home, not a refugee center.
The deep connection formed between the children and the artists demonstrated the camp's transformation into a sanctuary where the arts bridged the gap between their reality and a world of creativity. Fadia Al-Ser, a member of the National Band for Folk Instruments, sheds light on the incredible therapeutic potential of art.
The Great Art House is known for its effects on people, irrespective of their feelings. Using arts, we managed to improve the status of people who came from a war zone with a very bad psychological state.
Clearly, the artist's intention went beyond just entertaining. They understood and harnessed the therapeutic ability of creative expression. According to data from the United Nations, more than 4.6 million people have fled their homes in Sudan, where war has raged for more than 4 months between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces.
In Malawi, a southern African nation that criminalizes homosexuality, faith leaders have spoken out against same-sex relations. While Parliament recommends a referendum on whether to legalize same-sex marriage, civil society organizations say human rights should not be subject to a popular vote. From the capital Lilongwe, Chimwemwe Padatha has the story.
A debate is raging in Malawi over homosexuality, a criminal offense in the southern African nation that can draw a prison sentence of up to 14 years. The faith leaders of the mostly Christian country recently led nationwide street protests prompted by High Court cases in which a Dutch national man and a transgender Malawian woman are challenging the constitutionality of the country's laws concerning LGBTQI+ people. Some protesters worry that the cases might move toward validating LGBTQI+ relationships. The Reverend Philip Gambolide of the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian says marriage should be between a man and a woman.
It is God who initiated the marriage. And when God created a man, he saw it fit to create a woman to be his wife in order to reproduce and make a church. So because it is God's purpose, we cannot deviate now from his purpose. If we condone this behavior of homosexuality, obviously we are killing the church and there will be no children.
Faith leaders like Gambolide are now suggesting that the government should conduct a referendum over banning same-sex marriage. The International Relations Committee of Parliament has submitted a report to the governing body detailing its position on homosexuality. In this report, Parliament agrees with the religious leaders on possibilities of holding a referendum on same-sex marriages. The committee suggests that all protocols, including proposed laws concerning the LGBTQI+ community, should be put to people to decide, says Vice Chairperson Victoria Kingston.
This should be left in the hands of Parliament to deliberate and should put to people to decide in a form of referendum.
LGBTQI+ community members worry that with the increased focus on their rights, they will be targeted for violence. One member who asked not to be named for security reasons says the fear is constant.
Kind of puts us in a corner where we're not even, will be as isolated as before, more than before actually. It really has that implication. But it also limits the freedom of expression. I mean, that's a human right.
Michael Kayatsa, Executive Director of Malawi Center for Human Rights and Rehabilitation, cautions against holding the referendum, which he fears would block the advancement of LGBTQI plus rights. He says human rights should not be decided through a popular vote.
What they might need to do is maybe, prioritize dialogue, because what the church is saying is contrary to what the community here in Malawi wants. Nobody in Malawi, not even the LGBT-led organizations, are talking about same-sex marriage. What people are saying is that they simply want to, have the rights and enjoy their rights as human beings. It would be a waste of time. It would be a waste of resources to conduct a referendum.
In a petition delivered to Parliament, faith leaders want lawmakers not to pass any law that supports same-sex marriages. Human rights organizations worry this stand will fuel discrimination and violence against the country's already disadvantaged LGBTQI.
Culture means different things to different people and shouldn't be wiped away from history. This is why Ethiopian traditional dancer Malawi Belay hopes to preserve the country's last cultural hub, known as Fendika, and save it from demolition.
This is Fendika, the last cultural hub of its kind in Ethiopia's capital, and it's just escaped demolition. The club was taken over more than a decade ago by dancer and choreographer Malawi Belay. His dream was to revive Ethiopian performance and visual arts in the heart of Addis Ababa.
This is a place where people enjoy art just like a concert. It is a house that is making a huge contribution to Ethiopia by preserving the culture. It has made an impact as well as by shedding a light on Ethiopian culture for the tourists.
But in June this year, the city authority in Addis said it planned to tear Fendika down to make way for a luxury hotel. It looked like the days were numbered for an institution frequented by locals and tourists alike, including Japanese expert Hiroko Samejima.
Actually, I love Ethiopian music and dance and other traditional things. But among all those traditional things, Fendika's atmosphere is the best for me.
Belay and other supporters of Ethiopian dance and music got to work, campaigning to stop the demolition. Weeks later, after pressure from artists, journalists and locals, Belay said the capital's mayor told him Fendika would not be touched. 20 years ago, Fendika was one of 17 such clubs in the capital. But the rest have since been lost, often to the city's development aspirations, which have not spared many historic buildings. And though Fendika has been saved this time, Belay has been told that he will be required to develop the land.
The rainy season in Sudan and neighboring Chad is making it difficult to deliver aid to refugees from Sudan's war. In this report from the Chadian town of Ademo, reporter Henry Wilkins looks at some of the logistical challenges faced by those trying to deliver aid and talks to experts about how Sudan's failed planting season means a desperate food emergency could likely get even worse.
Mohamed Khamis fled western Darfur, where rights groups say atrocities against civilians are taking place, around 2 months ago. He arrived in Adamor, Chad, close to the Sudan border, where he thought he would be safe.
Initially, upon my arrival, there was a sense of security and safety. However, after the floods, homes were inundated and there is a severe scarcity of food.
Sudan and Chad's rainy season peaks in August and September. It's making access to Adamor very difficult for aid groups. VOA was only able to reach the refugee site in these amphibious all-terrain vehicles operated by the UN. Conventional vehicles like this truck carrying food aid to Adamor become stuck in thick mud. Attempts to rescue them unsuccessful. Ibrahim Mohammed Abdallah, a refugee who arrived 2 weeks ago, says the isolation in Adamor makes him frightened.
We have no security there. We have not remained there alone. And even we are afraid totally That's why we also come to the border of Chad. I need help. I don't want to stay there because here is also, it's very dangerous with my children.
Lack of access is not the only problem the rainy season brings. Humanitarians say its arrival also marks a grim milestone for Sudan.
For much of Sudan, the planting season is over. All along the River Nile would be the planting season for much of the country's staples. So the situation in Sudan is such that we have a problem today that will be much bigger tomorrow.
Khartoum and its surrounding area, which sits at the confluence of the Blue and White Nile rivers, has been rocked by fighting between the Sudanese military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, making it almost impossible for farmers to plant. To add to his woes, members of Mohammed Khamis' family are still unaccounted for. He does not know if they were able to escape Sudan, if they are alive or dead.
Specifically my aunts and brothers. We have been unable to locate them.
For the refugees of Adamor, the unfolding tragedy, at least for the moment, has no end in sight. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Adamor, Chad.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.